Welcome to the Millennial Psychologist. I'm your host, Dr. Margaret Lee. Today, I'm inviting my friend and colleague, Dr. Hannah Johashi, to answer the most asked questions by my clients in the LGBTQ community. Dr. Johashi is the founder of the Soft Heart Psychology, and she specializes in working with the LGBTQ community and the deaf community. Hi, Dr. J. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for allowing me to speak to this topic.
A lot of teens ask, how do people know that they're gay, lesbian, or bisexual?
That's a great question, Margaret. Not everybody knows for sure. I'll just say that. And, it's so funny because I was just talking about this with a friend. We were talking about how, they were saying that it's kind of like when you love chocolate ice cream. And that's just intuitively what you know that you love. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, you may like vanilla ice cream sometimes too, or maybe strawberry, or rainbow sherbet, or there's a whole other flavor that you don't even know about yet. And I thought that was an interesting point. And basically, I think that you don't always know for sure, and some people know very adamantly that this is the person or the type of people that I love or I'm attracted to. And for some folks, they may know and it may change over time. And I want to be careful with that part because I know that some people can say, okay, well, for example, maybe my bisexual daughter will, change back to just being with a man, right? And so I hope that my words will be taken just kind of like to fit whatever the person needs and not like non-acceptance. It's more so just to say that there can be some fluidity about where someone is at with their sexual orientation. And no one person is the expert. While I have a lot of experience with children, teens, adults, and older adults who are LGBTQ, no one person can know how everybody feels and speak to how everybody in the community feels.
And Dr. J, at what age do people know about this? What if I'm lesbian, but my mom keeps telling me that you'll grow out of it? Would I?
Yeah, I've heard that before. Yeah, and that can be so much pressure for someone, right? And can feel invalidating. So what age? I've heard people talk about knowing really, really young, and that's of course relative. I'm not giving any number, but childhood, we'll say. And I know folks who have known when they were a teen. And then I know people who knew when they were in middle adulthood. So it can happen that, someone has a moment of realization or reflection where they're kind of like, oh, okay. So it can happen at any age, whether childhood or middle, late adulthood.
Even middle adulthood?
Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the person was in the closet the whole time. And it could be the fluidity that we spoke to earlier.
Mm-hmm. And is gay, lesbian a mental disorder? Like, am I normal? Am I abnormal?
Margaret, I know you've mentioned that you've heard some people asking about that. And I'm so happy you bring it up so we can address it right here and right now. And that one is like, oh gosh, of course it's not a mental disorder. But of course folks will go there because we put so much morality and so much pressure and shame on who someone loves and who someone's attracted to. And that's really quite sad to think about, and such a disappointment because it causes this disconnect. And so of course it's not a mental disorder. If we took a person, for example, who, let's say, who identifies as queer or is gay, right? And we say that they're in, let's say, a pretty homophobic environment, let's say in the US, right? Mm-hmm. And we pluck them and we put them in a society where they are quite affirming and there's a lot of equality around their identities, including their queer identity. Their mental health might be better here. Most likely I would expect it to be better here than here. And that's because the society and the pressure that we put on somebody, well, then of course they're going to start experiencing stress in their body and their mind. And that's because of the society, not because of who they are, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I tell my client, women were not allowed to vote. You know, did that make it abnormal or normal, right? It was just the social construct at the time, right?
Exactly. Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. When we as a society oppress a person or a group of people, they might, understandably experience it in their body, in their spirit, in their mind, in their psyche. And we do know that there are disproportionate numbers of LGBTQ people with physical and mental health difficulties because of that exact thing, because there are disparities in healthcare, because there are prejudices in society and oppression. So I love your example of what we know about how we treated women, and sometimes do still treat women.
Yeah, that's so empowering, right? To know that like this is not normal or abnormal, this is one way of living, right? But some people like to put a label on it and group, one group as normal, one group of abnormal, when there's like a spectrum, right? We're only talking about LGBTQ. I know there's a lot more on that spectrum too, right? Dr. J, what is coming out?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. And I'm happy that we're addressing it so we don't kind of leave it to the side. So coming out is kind of sharing one's authentic identity or identities with people, and it's been known to be quite a Eurocentric sort of experience in that, for example, I'll give you an example. There's a man who wrote the book, I think it's called Invisible Man Got the Whole World Watching. And it's an amazing book. And there's a part where he talks about why do we expect people to bear the burden of coming out? And while it can be quite freeing, and while it can be quite a connecting experience to one's authentic self, and then hopefully to communities, it can also be very difficult for some people. We don't want to ignore the complexities of intersecting identities. We don't want to ignore the complexities of what that might mean for the person. We want to invite them in. And what he talks about in his book is inviting in, making a warm environment where a gay person or LGBTQ person would feel welcome to come into, rather than having to bear the burden of coming out. And again, there's lots of folks who, can attest to the freedoms felt when coming out. But I get tempted by this idea of a society where we invited everyone in. And so there's, to kind of summarize, there are definitely some hugely authentic benefits to coming out, and at the same time we don't want to expect people to come out, and we don't want to come out for people.
Right. I mean, the best scenario is no one ever need to go in the closet.
I love that.
Do I have to come out if, let's say, I'm realizing that this is something that's part of my identity, this is so important to me, but my parents, or if I'm living in a different state and they don't quite support this, do I have to come out?
It would be up to you, right? And it would be kind of dependent on you and your circumstances, right? So I say that to say that there are so many factors to consider. If somebody is making a decision from love and not from fear, that would be probably the best. If they're feeling like this is a great decision to make because it's most authentically me, beautiful. Someone feels like they should do it, that would kind of suck. Sorry to put it simply. And I also want to say that there's some complexities, and I don't want anyone to have to make a decision out of fear. But when someone is worried that their finances might be taken away, or their shelter might be taken away, or their love, their communities might be taken away, I don't want to make it such a simple thing as, everyone come out. when people might be risking their physical safety or their financial support, which is food and shelter included, and they may choose to come out and still experience some unexpected difficulties. So I guess I just say that there's a lot of things that someone could process with their therapist before coming out, or with other queer kids or teens in the community, or with friends who are allies, because in processing it, they can kind of figure out if that's the most helpful and most loving, step for them.
Thank you. Some of my clients also ask, how can my parents, grandparents, aunt, uncle, friends said that they love me, but at the same time, they go with the don't ask, don't tell policy, or they hint that if I say it out loud, they're gonna disown me. How can they say that they love me and not accept my orientation?
Yeah, that's a hard one. And I would never assume to know whether or not detachment with love or boundaries is helpful there, or whether or not some separation, or whether or not some patience in their family members processing themselves. I can never assume what would be right or most beneficial to each person. And that's just such a hard one. And again, we can't just assume or shame family members or anybody in the situation, right? So we've seen plenty of folks kind of just see where their families are at, and sometimes it takes a couple days, sometimes a very long time, sometimes they don't open up to that, and that can be hard. I think in your question you were saying, well, what if the family's still there? They haven't actually disconnected from the child or teen. They're still there. They still claim to support and have some softness in their heart towards the person, and have this sort of negative view towards this part of them, who they are. And I think in that situation, it goes back to most of my answers that it depends. And I would hope that the person would really find a lot of solace in their chosen family, while their biological family or the family of origin kind of does what they need to be able to get to the point where they can love the whole of them. Because loving them conditionally really leaves a huge part of love out of it. And that's really, really hard for a child or teen. We know what that can do to somebody, to anybody, right? If our whole self isn't cared for and supported and loved. And then, if we take, for example, my dad's side of the family is from Iran, right? And if we just have an Iranian teen in here, we just say, for example, somebody from my background, right? My mom is white, my dad is Iranian. We just say, just come out, don't worry about it. We have no idea how that would be. For example, in that exact example in Iran, they could be killed. And so we just want to keep all that in mind. And we want to, at the same time, I think, empower and support the family members to processing or the support that they need within their own communities, so that they can go back to the child or teen with that open embrace as much as possible, because we're really missing a big opportunity for connection there if we dismiss a part of a person.
And that's very difficult, right, for both parties, sounds like.
I think the great part about our practice, right, is that we get to work with children, teens, and their parents and their family members to kind of bridge those communications and connections. And that's so important. I hear from parents, hey, my child is bi, for example, and we're from, the understanding that we just want to support I just want to support my child. I didn't necessarily grow up, with understanding this, but I'm trying, right? And I love working with someone like that, right? Because I'm like, okay, you have an open heart. We can work with that. we could work with that all day long. And then, there's some folks who don't have that. And I want them to know that there's always, and that's so hard. I do want them to know that there's always the option of reparenting their own self, right? And loving on their own self. And hopefully seeking support within community, within, gay, queer communities.
Yeah. And I always want to remind my teens that the society is progressing, right? A lot of people, especially in our generation, start having gender neutral names for the babies, are being very conscious about not steering the children to either being heterosexual or gay, lesbian, or even leave it like gender neutral for the baby themselves to define, how they want to shape their own identity.
I love that beautiful message of hope. That's great. Yes, that's a great point.
Yeah, so even though wherever you are watching this video, you might be in a situation that the general community is not supportive of who you are or who you love or who you like, who you want to be, right? There's a bigger community out there that actually disapprove that view. You will find your own community that supports you and love you and appreciate you the way you are.
Beautifully said.
Yeah, and Dr. J, some of my clients wonder, well, how can therapy help with my sexual orientation? Like, are you gonna change my sexual orientation if I talk about it?
Ooh, ouch. Yeah. I've heard that one too. I'm sure you have too. Yeah. It's like, oh my goodness. To think that you think that you're broken, to need to be fixed, to need to be changed. Ouch. Yeah. So therapy can help with the social, political, cultural pressures that I was talking about earlier, right? Therapy can help with opening communication lines between family and chosen family and friends. Therapy can help with so many things. It doesn't change one's sexual orientation. I'm so grateful you brought that up. For folks who are struggling and just want not to feel this way. And I think we can have a lot of compassion and understanding for that. But I will say that those types of therapies have been hugely unsuccessful and damaging. They've caused trauma, and folks who have experienced that have needed more therapy to repair the wounds of those types of therapies. They're scary, they're triggering to folks to even say it, right? So no, it doesn't. Therapy doesn't change our sexual orientation, but it can help us love on our own selves better. And it's much like what you said. I just love what you said, Margaret. It's like, I'm sure that you're over there affirming yourself, whoever you are watching this video, but let me do it with you. Like, you are loved, you are worthy, you are enough as you are. And that can be hard. That can be hard to take that in and then to give it to ourselves, and therapy can help with that.
Yeah.
You are okay as you are.
There's nothing broken to be fixed.
Right.
If our audience is watching this video and they're struggling with their sexual orientation, where can they seek help safely without afraid of being judged, I guess?
Yeah, that's a really special question, and I definitely think you'd be one of the folks that people can reach out to and say, hey, do you have any open slots? Because there are people who you can just tell will be supportive. And I really want to say that tapping into that intuition when you're talking with someone, whether they're a professional or just a safe person, if you feel like, this person might feel safe to talk to about this, you can kind of take baby steps to see if that would actually feel safe. And that could be, a teacher, a psychologist, a therapist, a friend at school. It could be another community member, peer, or mentor. It could be anybody. If you are looking for therapy or a psychologist, there are so many evidence-based treatments to address a number of difficulties. I do want to say that because you asked about safety, I want to say that the number one curative factor, or the biggest bang for your buck, the biggest thing that's going to help someone in therapy, is the therapeutic alliance. That's that thing that you feel when you connect with someone. Okay, and it's odd because here we are on screens right now, right? But we're going to go with that statistic, that data, not statistic, but data that indicates that this connection, this alliance that we have, is the number one thing that's going to help me feel heard, seen, and feel like I can trust you to talk about this stuff, right? And that stuff might be how auntie or grandpa or whoever, is giving me this look because of my new short hair, or you know what I mean, right? Like those are scary topics, and we can pick up on whether or not our therapist or psychologist is that safe person. So that's why I say someone like you or you, right? And then there's also like places like, for example, Gaylesta. It's GAYLESTA, and that's a directory online, and that's just in the Bay Area. There's gazillions of places, right? But you can go on Gaylesta. It's a directory, which just means you type in the type of therapist you think would be a good match, and you find them. And then again, with online, during the pandemic, during shelter in place, we can kind of broaden our search, to all of California. And if there's sliding scale needs, which means like if you, for example, need someone for lesser, less fee, you can find them too online. Another thing is that therapy isn't the only way to get support and to get what you need. There's also like community supports and peer-led supports. There's like, for example, in South Bay Area, there's youth space, right? So there's a bunch of different types of community groups, as well as therapists and psychologists. And within community groups, there's also community groups that acknowledge and honor those intersecting identities. And there's groups like, for example, for Southeast Asian LGBTQ people, or different groups within the queer community. And I think that's so important, because sometimes within the queer community we've known that we haven't always been as inclusive as we could be. So I just say all that to say there's so many different types of support. It doesn't have to be this scary, like sitting across from a therapist and telling your life story or whatever. So whatever you need, it's out there. Yeah.
And if you're on a college campus, there's usually a community, right? There's usually
right, like gay alliance groups at school. Yeah. Big point.
Thank you, Dr. J, for sharing your wisdoms and experience.
Thank you so much, Margaret. It's been such an honor, and I'm so grateful to be able to answer some of these questions today with you.
So that's it from me and Dr. Johashi. If you have any questions regarding this topic, feel free to comment below. Thank you so much for watching.